Welcome Home with Barbara Beck, a Good Life 45 original production. Get ready to watch hope happen.
Hi everyone, I'm Barbara Beck and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to Welcome Home. Today we're going to be looking at why we need to follow God's lead even when it doesn't make sense. You're going to be hearing a great example of God's sovereignty and the need to simply trust God when all indicators said to do the exact opposite. Restaurant owner and entrepreneur John Rivers tells of his journey to follow his passion, which was to start a restaurant even when he didn't have the resources and he was down to almost his last dollar. Common sense said to run the other way, but John persevered. He followed God's lead even though it didn't seem practical, and look where he is today. Popular, successful, and impacting the kingdom in huge ways because he was willing to step out and trust God. You'll be hearing his story later on in the program, but first, let me share one of my favorite passages from Proverbs, which says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path." I love those verses, but living them is a lot harder. Well, let's hear from the current ladies and see how they've managed to follow God's lead when it didn't make sense. Welcome, ladies.
Hello.
Hi. So glad to have everybody here with us today. I mean, isn't that true that we want to follow God, but sometimes God just says, nope, you're going to do it a different way. Anybody ever have that happen?
Yes.
Yes.
But the funny thing about my story is that I was so prideful and I really thought I was following exactly in his lead. And then it was like a disaster. And so then I was like, wait, so self-righteous. God, I thought you told me to do this. I thought this was your lead. And I mean, I didn't really hear him say these words, but basically he was like, yeah, well, you just aren't as smart as you thought you are. I mean, he really had to get me on my knees, almost
humble
broke.
You.
Yes, very, very humbled. And now, we've had huge success, but I really did have to kind of just lay it all down and say, not yours, not my way, Lord, yours, and you tell me what I'm supposed to do next, because I thought I was so smart. And what happened was, I'm a CPA, and my husband and I wanted to own our own business. And so we overpaid for a business by about $1 million, which is all we had. I mean, that was, and so
that's all you had, $1 million?
I mean,
wow.
And I say we didn't have that. In other words, we used 401k, we used everything.
Right.
And it was a disaster. And I'm a CPA, and I'm supposed to be so smart.
Right.
And so it was just very, it was the best experience probably of my life to, one, grow closer to the Lord and follow his lead and not my own.
Because you did almost go bankrupt, right?
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
So God took you out of that.
Yes.
He taught you, would you say the biggest lesson you learned from that was what?
Well, I think I had a major issue with holding success and money on a pedestal. I'm a pedestal putter sometimes. I put people, I put things, and God certainly will rip them down if you put anything on a pedestal. And I've learned to put him first.
Good.
And finally, I think the biggest thing that's come out of it is that success and money are just not important to me anymore. I mean, of course, do I like it? And but it's just not the end-all, be-all.
Well, and I know, too, just to give some perspective here, Leanne and her family are huge givers. You give a lot away of what God has blessed you with.
That's even part of the story, like, how can you do this? Because
when I've been giving away money.
Well, no, not the, but how can I? We had at that point been giving to lots of organizations that we had to tell them, during this season of our lives, we can't, and that was, again, a part of the pride. Pride is always an issue in my life. And so we had to just be honest, because you can't give what you don't have. And so that's super important too. But yes, now we're able to give even more, which is great.
Praise God for that. Anybody else following God's lead?
Well, I want to follow up with something you just said, because this is a lesson that I just learned last week or the week before.
Fresh.
A really good, fresh perspective. We met with a man who has mentored our family, and he's kind of a financial counselor to us, and he's very wise. And we have been giving money towards a certain endeavor that we're a part of. And I've just been, the whole season, the whole time, I've just wanted to be faithful to where we've shared these resources. I wanted to make sure that we are walking along the path of faithfulness. And Lord, do you want us using this money towards this endeavor? Or is there another ministry, another philanthropy, another charity that you would rather us use this money towards? And so we were debating it back and forth. And finally he said to us, he said, Kristen, he said, God doesn't need your money. He goes, he's going to accomplish his purposes whether or not you give here, there, or wherever. And that there was such freedom in that, because we'd felt led to give this towards this endeavor that we were giving towards. But I just wanted to make sure we were being faithful. And so in him saying that, the Lord doesn't need it. I mean, we know that it's all his. Everything that, we talk a lot about stewardship. We know that it's all his. I just wanted to be faithful. And I don't know if I was caught up in the pride piece of being faithful. Maybe that was it. But I just was so enlightened by his saying that. It was like a light bulb. Like, the Lord doesn't need it. Like, you put such emphasis on, I want to make sure I'm giving to the right. Well, he doesn't need it. He just wants your obedience and your heart to be in the right place. And I was like, yes, okay. Thank you, Lord.
It's hit me real hard, like you talk about this, is sometimes it's that whole thing of thank God for his unanswered prayers. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I look back in my life, right, that, I think I'm so smart and got it so together, and God, I'm going to help you out. You just sit down, and I got it going here. You just take a rest for the day. And then I'm like, what did I do? And then there's times that I prayed, and God didn't answer it the way I wanted it to be answered. And then I'm like, thank you, God, that you didn't do that. And we just watched this new movie this week. Clint Eastwood just did it about Paris 34, 25, 14. Or whatever. Have you seen it? It hit me so hard. It was so great for our kids to watch. It's got a little bit of language. And I don't know, this movie really encouraged me. You got to watch it. I mean, if you can, a little bit of bad language, so you got to keep flipping it down. But the message to me was so strong about really trusting God, that in the circumstances that we don't understand, God's in control.
You, Deborah?
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, God's word says his ways are not our ways. Right. His thoughts are not our thoughts. In fact, his ways are as high as the heavens are from the earth. And so I always find myself in situations where I think I have it figured out, and then all of a sudden, it's like I feel like God is telling me to do something that just makes like zero sense. I'll give you an example from my previous life. I have two really good ones, but I'll give you one. I worked for Orange County government for 13 and a half years. I was a young single mother, the only source of income in my house. No child support, no food stamps, no nothing. I was it. And I'll never forget it. I felt like the Lord was telling me it was time to leave that job. And I can remember thinking, and do what? Who is going to take care of these kids? Who's going to pay my bills? Who's going to do? I went through 2 years, 2 solid years of fighting with God about leaving this job. And I'll never forget it. I was standing in the kitchen. I owned my own home as a young single mother. I had my own house, 4-bedroom house, and I had the biggest yard in my neighborhood. My backyard was huge. And I was standing in my kitchen, and I just broke. I was washing dishes, and I started crying, and the tears were like crocodile tears. They were just going plop, plop, plop in the water. And I'm saying, God, I don't know how to do this, but okay, I'll do it. And I kid you not, I go back to work, and it was Valentine's Day. And my boss decides that she's going to have a staff meeting over lunch on Valentine's Day. And that was it. I said to her, I will be here for your meeting, but you're not going to take away my lunch hour. Your husband doesn't work in this city, and so you don't have a lunch date, but I have a lunch date. I went to lunch with my now husband. And I said to him over lunch, I said, listen, I have been battling with this thing for 2 years. I had never even said this to him. I've been battling with this thing for 2 years, and I have to do what God is calling me to do. I went on and on and on, on and on and on. And he looked me square in the face and he said, whatever God tells you to do, do it. Yeah. And I thought, okay, that's all you have to say. I went back to work. I wrote my resignation. I'll never forget it. My last day on my job was March 7th, 1997. I was a young single mother. I was not engaged. I was nowhere near being married. Mm-hmm. November 23rd of that same year, I got married. Wasn't until I resigned from that job, I kid you not, that my husband asked me to marry him. It was as though my disobedience to God was holding up the blessing that God had for me.
That's amazing.
I had no clue how, things were going to work out or any of that. Never dreamed that I would have the life that I have today, but I am convinced that taking that step and being obedient to God was pivotal in everything that's happened in my life for the last 20 years. If I hadn't done that, I don't know what direction my life would have taken.
Deborah, I have a similar story, and I hadn't really thought about it in that way until you started telling your story. But I went to college, graduated from college with a degree in English, planned to teach school. I taught school for 13 years, loved it, never planned to do anything else with my life. I was a school teacher, and I started getting these feelings like I should quit school. Why? Why would I quit teaching school when I was...
Something you love.
Something I love. I'm educated to do that, but I did get some discontentment too. I was like, I'm tired of this. I'm trained to do this. This is my career. Why is God taking me out of this? It made no sense at all to me. So I quit teaching. And long story in between, some other little couple things that I did. One was working for my husband, which was a big, big mistake. I was like, why are you bossing me around? He said, because I am your boss. And I said, oh, okay, that's why I can't work for you. So we stopped that. But there were another couple little things. And then all of a sudden, God said, I want you in television. I'm like, I don't have any experience. I didn't go to broadcast journalism school. I had no experience doing this. And this course of my life, this season of my life has been one of the greatest blessings, getting to know our viewers, getting to know all of you ladies, working with people that have phenomenal stories, hearing life-changing stories, doing the kinds of things that I'm doing now that makes no sense when I look back at it. Why would I do this job when I have no training in it at all?
Can I tell you something funny? When God first started telling me that it was time to leave that job, I thought I was going crazy. Again, because I was the only source of income for my household. I had a mortgage. I had children to take care of. How am I going to do this? So I thought something was wrong with me, right? I'm beating on my mic, I'm sorry. So I thought I was crazy. A job that literally I could do it in my sleep. I loved what I was doing. I could do it like that. I wasn't answering, and I became miserable in my job. I had, before I left, God, I hope she's not watching, the worst boss ever. It was like God said, you're not gonna move. I'll make you extremely uncomfortable in a place where you have been comfortable for 13 years. But the last 2 years that I was there, it was like, really? Yeah. And literally, when I finally said yes, what I realized was if I didn't resign, I was probably going to be fired because I had become that uncomfortable. And so my yes to God wasn't about the job. I wouldn't be sitting here with you, Barbara.
Right.
Had you not answered, and I answered the call of God to make that change.
Right.
There's no way I would have landed here.
And just like all these stories, I think it's only when we get out of our own selves, right, and have to rely on the Lord. Like, look, He called you to do something you did not think you were equipped for.
I was not
but
equipped for.
Abraham didn't think he was equipped. I mean, like, only when God equips us with the natural talents He's already given us, but He gives us the I don't know, His power to do His work.
His abilities.
You know, it's amazing. And earlier, you were talking about Charlie and singing, and I wanted to say, just have him talk to the Lord, because God gave him that, and it's really when we're uncomfortable that God can use us the most. You know, only when we get out of our own way. You know,
I wanted to bring up scripture from Exodus. So Exodus 13:17-18. And this is when the Israelites are in Egypt wandering around. And I think that the point of this particular scripture is that God led the Israelites the longer, harder way because they weren't ready.
They weren't ready.
They weren't ready to go into the promised land. And so sometimes when we don't understand what's going on, if we feel like the Lord's not listening to us or He's not speaking to us, sometimes it's just because we're not ready, and He's allowing that extra time for us to get to where we need to go.
You know, I heard a story growing up that always ministers to me. It's about the little girl that had the little 10-cent pearl. You ever heard that, the 10-cent pearl necklace? And she worked so hard to go buy this 10-cent little pearl necklace. And so every night her daddy would come in the bedroom and say, honey, I love your pearl necklace. And she'd say, me too, Daddy. It's just so baby. He goes, well, why don't you give me your pearl necklace? And she'd say, Daddy, no, I'll give you my baby doll, but not my pearl necklace. So he'd say, okay. Then the next night he'd come back in, the same thing. And she'd say, please, Daddy, I'll give you my favorite, you know, unicorn, but not my necklace. And so finally on the third night, they walk in and he says, honey, you know, will you give me your necklace? And she reluctantly just pulls it out and she puts it in his hand. But I love this. But he pulls out a big blue box that has real pearls in it. And I think that is, so many times we're so reluctant to give God what's in our hand. We hold so tight onto relationships, onto jobs, onto whatever it is, fear, our past, unforgiveness. We're holding this type, money, greed, whatever's hatred, whatever it is, anger. I mean, I just see us clenching it. But God's saying, if you'll open it up and just be willing to release it, He's got something better.
Yeah, way better.
Yeah.
I love the verses, Deborah, that you brought up, I think from Isaiah. Is it Isaiah 55? His thoughts are not my thoughts, His ways are not my ways. What other scripture do we have that would encourage us to follow God's lead when it doesn't make sense?
Well, Jeremiah 29:11, we say it all the time, but it's one of the best.
Yeah.
For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans of welfare and not of evil, but to give you a hope and a future.
John 14:15. If you love me, keep my commandments.
I've got 1 Corinthians 10:31. Oh, wait, no. Romans 8:28, sorry. And we know that those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to His purpose.
And I think the book of James is, you know, a good reminder it's a short book that we can get through easily, but one of my favorite verses in the whole Bible is in James, and it's James 1:5. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And then it goes on to say in verse 4, oh wait, my numbers might be off. Anyway, James 1:3-4. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything.
So we need to persevere. God's going to be developing our character. We need to be able to step out of our comfort zones so that He can start teaching us some things and humbling us and helping us to follow God's lead even when it doesn't make sense. And oftentimes, viewers, if you're like we are at our household, a lot of times it doesn't make sense. And it's been through years and years and years of prayer and practice that have proven God's faithfulness. He is always faithful. He's never disappointed us. He's never forsaken us, and I know that will be true in your life as well. Before we leave this particular segment, I want to answer a question that you have right now. And the question is, why do the current ladies always seem to match? Right? Are they not asking that? Somebody out there is going to write me and say, because you have in the past, why are you wearing Blue, yellow, blue, yellow, blue. I got to tell you this. We did change seats so that it wasn't all blue in one place and all yellow in the other. But this is so cool. Doesn't God do this for us?
Every time.
We don't call each other ahead of time.
Nope.
We don't say, what are you going to wear today, Deborah? And I'll wear that or whatever. It's just so cool. God cares about the little teeny tiny things in each one of our lives. So I know that's trivial. It's not important, but it's just the kind of neat thing that God does for us. And we always laugh about it. We get on the set and we're like, oh, wow, we matched today. So God is good, and He is good all the time. Trust Him even when it doesn't make sense. And stay with us because we've got more coming up.
Coming up next.
That gift that resides inside of us, once we align our heart and our lives to that passion, that's when we come alive. And quite frankly, that's when God works through us. You know, discovering God, I believe, is when we pursue what that passion is. Experiencing God is when we live it with Him by our side.
You're watching Barbara Beck on Welcome Home, where we share life-changing stories filled with hope. You're watching Welcome Home, bringing you life-changing stories filled with hope.
I am so glad you're here with us today because you're in for a treat. Our great friend, cooking partner, and lover of food and Jesus, we have John Rivers from when he spoke at the Seminole County Prayer Breakfast. John will tell his story of following God's lead when it didn't make sense. Enjoy, John Rivers.
I'm going to share a story today, the backstory behind this, and the two things that were really so prevalent and important to me along the way, and it has to do with passion and purpose. And I'll start by sharing one of the first lessons that I learned. And that lesson is really the reason and the purpose behind our work, our occupation, what we do and why we do it. I do believe that there's three things that we get out of our occupation, our job. The first thing is we're doing it. The reason that we're going away from our family and we're leaving in 8 to 10 hours a day is because we're progressing, we're learning, we're going after something. Okay? The second thing that we do is we do this for a reason because it's something we believe in. It's something that we're passionate about. And the third thing is the reason that we're doing this is because we're making a living. We're getting paid. Okay? Now, I will ask you this, and I'm going to ask it because I was in the same position many, many years ago. If you look at the reason what you're doing today, what's on your business card, is it because you're learning? Is it because you're passionate? Or is it because you're getting paid for it? Now, there's seasons in life where we're blessed with all three, but I will be the first to tell you that if you're not learning and you're not passionate and you find yourself only doing it for number three, for the money, it makes a long, long day. And there is a hole that can't be filled. If you're not doing what God made you to do, there's no amount of money that's going to make you happy. And I made that mistake. When I came out of college, I mistakenly thought that the more money I could make, the happier I was going to be. And once I got to that position that I wanted to have, it was then that I had to learn the lesson. It has nothing to do with it. Because if that hole is there, that money is never going to fill it. So many times, so many of us, we start out pursuing our passions, and we settle for a paycheck. And so many times we go out to make a life, and we end up making a living. You see, I believe that each and every one of us was given a special gift, given something from God that defines who we are and that defines our purpose of why he has us here. And that purpose, and it talks about it in 2 Corinthians. Okay? Some of us are made to be preachers, some of us are made to be healers, some of us are made to be prophets. That gift that resides inside of us, once we align our heart and our lives to that passion, that's when we come alive. And quite frankly, that's when God works through us. Discovering God, I believe, is when we pursue what that passion is. Experiencing God is when we live it with him by our side. And that's an important thing. You think about it, if God gave us that gift, it's only with him in that walk can we truly experience the full capacity of what it's supposed to be. I love it. And so many times you'll ask, what is my gift? What is my passion? What is that? And I always go back to kids. If you asked me when I was a little boy, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would have said, I want to be a cook. I don't know why. I want to own a restaurant. Had nothing to do with our family lineage whatsoever. We had a bunch of doctors and lawyers and, stuff like that. We didn't have anybody who was in the restaurant business whatsoever. But I knew it was in my heart. And I love it when you ask children, what would you like to be when you grow up? And you know what? You hear their hearts. You hear their dreams. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be an NBA basketball player. You know what? What's beautiful about that is nobody has told them what they can't be yet. Nobody has told them you're too slow, you're not smart enough, you're not tall enough. So much of the story that we believe becomes the person who we are. And when you start listening to all those things of what you can't be, you begin to lean into that, and that defines you. And if I talk to different people today, a lot of folks will come and want to sit down with me, and they'll say, well, I don't know about this passion thing. I'm not supposed to be, if I go after that. And I'll ask them, what do you want to be? And I ask them, close your eyes and just think about it. When you were a child, when you grew up, what was your dream? What was your aspiration? And it's amazing what people say. Now, and I tell them it has to be occupational, okay? And it can't be sitting on a beach drinking margaritas. You have to be productive in this. And it's really beautiful. I want to be a teacher. I want to work with kids. I want to open up an orphanage. I want to run a ministry. And I will ask them the same question that I asked myself. And somebody challenged me over 12 years ago. Why don't you go do it? Because I always wanted to run a smokehouse. I always wanted to have a barbecue. Why don't you go do it? And I hear my answer in them, oh, it's too risky. It's so many restaurants fail. 8 out of 10 restaurants fail in it. What if I'm not good enough? What if it fails? I have a mortgage. I have car payments. I have kids in school. What if it doesn't work out? The common thread is between all that? It's fear. Fear. Fear is the number one weapon that the enemy uses to keep us from what God intended us to be. 2 Timothy 1:7 said, for God did not give us a spirit of fear, but one of strength and one of power and perseverance. And when we listen to those fears, we begin to listen to the lies. The onset of fear it's worry. The onset of worry is doubt. And that's where it starts. That seed of doubt that gets in our mind that says you can't do it, you're not good enough, you can't ever possibly become that. And you believe that, and that's the life that you live. But I tell you what, that seed, that passion that God gave you, that gift, never goes away. Even all those 20 years in healthcare, I still found myself cooking. I still found myself going all over the country being passionate. We tend to live our lives around it. And sometimes something has to happen to wake us up and to call us back from it. And as you heard on the video, mine was literally a phone call. And this was back in 2005. And I'll never forget the day. It was a Friday afternoon, and I'm sitting at my desk. And on my desk, I had a phone, and it had 2 lines. Okay, one line went through my assistant. That was about 90% of the phone calls, and she screened everything. The other line was a direct line. Only about 5 or 6 people knew this phone number. And I'll never forget that morning, that line rang. And I remember picking it up, and I remember distinctly the words on the other side, Mr. Rivers, I'm so sorry to hear about your daughter. And I asked the lady, I said, Cameron, what's wrong with Cameron? Cameron was my kindergarten daughter at the time. She says, her brain tumor, what they didn't put on there is her terminal brain tumor. Now, I hung up the phone, and it took me about 20 minutes to get a hold of Monica, my wife. Now, in that 20 minutes, even though I was in the healthcare business, and the irony, I was the general manager of the oncology division, okay? I ran the cancer division for our company. Even though I was in that business, never once did I have an understanding or appreciation or feel of what it must be like to have someone that you love that much going through something that terminal. And let me put it specifically, someone that you love that much, no matter what your title is, no matter how much money you make, no matter how powerful you are, none of that is going to make a difference in this situation. I always tell my folks on my team that a true problem can't be solved with money. If a problem can be fixed with money, you haven't encountered a real problem yet, a real challenge. And it's funny, sometimes that God brings us to that point. It goes back to the other saying that sometimes you have to get to a point that all you have is Jesus to realize that all you need is Jesus. And, and we look at these challenges that we face and we look at these problems as, great burdens. And the thing that I have cautioned and taught myself to ask is, instead of saying, why are you doing this to me, Lord? I ask God, what are you trying to show me in this, Lord? Because there's always something that's there. And the things that we complain about become the chains that bind us. And if you want to change a situation fast, you change your perspective of it. I always tell people they're in the wrong positions and they hate it and they're complaining about this. And I said, what are you doing about it? Oh, I'm, not doing this and not doing that. I said, you want to get out of that position, do the best you can at it. Be the best that you possibly can. If you're not doing something you're passionate about, bring passion into what you're doing. You want to change your environment, change the continents and everybody around you, you change yourself. You lift yourself up. And I tell you, the first job I ever had, I was 16 years old. I grew up in Jacksonville, and it was a little pizza place called The Loop. And I remember filling out the application and getting the phone call, and I got the job, and I said, that's fantastic. I go in there to meet the manager, and he says, congratulations. You do all the paperwork. He says, let me introduce you, everybody. He grabs me by the shoulder, and he walks me through the kitchen, introduces me to all the chefs and the cooks, brings me back to this little dark corner in the back, and I said, congratulations, you're our dishwasher. And I looked at him, and I was so young and naive, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, sir, there must be a misunderstanding. I said, clearly, I applied to be a cook here. And he looked at me, and he said, this is a lesson in life. He said, you got to work your way up. And for the first few days, my head was down, and I was in the dumps, and man, this stinks. This is not what I want to be doing. And back then, you think, oh my gosh, this is my station in life. And then after a while, I said, you know what, this isn't me. So, to me, music is a big uplift, and I love y'all's music. It's beautiful. Big uplift. Now, remember the old tape recorders we used to have when we were kids? Like with the blue and the yellow with a little handle on the top? And remember you had to push record and play at the same time in order to get, you had to wait for the DJ, to stop talking so you can actually get that song. And I'll never forget my little daughter, she was in high school, she heard me do the speech one time. She goes, Dad, what's wrong with you? Why didn't you just download the songs? I said, I was pretty slow back then, honey. Well, I brought my tape recorder in, and I just put my tape recorder above my dishwashing station. And I did it for my own edification, okay? And this is when it happened. I started getting happy. It lifted my spirits. Well, guess what? Everybody around me, it changed the continents. Everything around me became lighter and brighter. And people started coming up. You know what? Every day that went by, they started coming and singing songs with me. And before you know it, they were helping me, and I was timing everything and see how fast we go. I said, well, this is kind of cool. So the next week, I brought tiki lights. And I put these tiki lights above my dishwashing station. And more people came up, and more people are hanging out with me. I said, this is great. Well, the manager comes, and he recognizes this. He says, John, wow, I'm going to give you a promotion. You're doing such a fantastic job. I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord. I can finally go cook. He grabs me by the shoulder. He walks me through the kitchen once again, brings me to the front of the house and says, congratulations, you're our busboy. Truth of the matter, I had to work my way all the way through high school and all pay for my own college. And I worked in restaurants almost the whole time. Never once was I allowed to cook in an actual kitchen. Never once. I had to open my own dang restaurant just so I could actually cook and do something. Well, when that phone call came, I hung up with this wonderful lady. She's crying. And I got a hold of Monica. It took me about 20 minutes. Okay? And thank goodness it wasn't Cameron. Okay? But that 20 minutes and that phone call shook me up so much. I remember saying to Monica, we're going to help this family. We've got to do something. And I didn't know what it was, but we got to do something. Now, I'll tell you this. We found, it took us a little while, we found this beautiful, beautiful family. Okay? The little girl's name was Megan. Right? Get this. Megan wasn't in Cameron's class. Okay? Megan didn't go to the same school with Cameron. We didn't go to the same church. We didn't live in the same neighborhood. We didn't live in the same cities. We weren't in the same industry. Okay? There is no reason that that phone call came to me on that Friday afternoon on my private line. And I know it wasn't a mistake because the lady said clearly, Mr. Rivers, I'm so sorry to hear about your daughter. And I'll tell you the rest of the story, but I'll tell you this. To this day, we don't know who the phone call came from. It was a mistaken phone call. But had that phone call not come in, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you about what God's done in my life. You know, there's an old theologian in the 19th century called Kierkegaard. And Kierkegaard said we have to live our lives moving forward, but we tend to understand our lives looking back. And you just have to look at each one of those situations that we're in. There is a purpose. You know, God is intentional. He loves us. And that purpose is always good. Well, we found that little girl. And it's so funny. In the beginning, we poured in indigent care and nursing and pharmacists to them. And after about a week or so, I finally realized that they don't need more drugs. They don't need more doctors. They need money. So I called up the husband. And I said, John, hey, let me write you a check. We talked about it for about 10 minutes and argued about it, and he absolutely would not take money. So I hung up the phone, okay? Now, this is the first time I ever felt a tangible push from God. And people said, what do you mean by that? Did you hear his voice? I said, no. I wish it was a loud voice. I wish it was clear. I wish it was a text. To be honest with you, it wasn't. You know what? It was a stirring in my heart, okay? The word heart is used 892 times in the Bible. Okay, third only to God and to Lord. There's a reason. That's where God reaches us. And when our heart is aligned to his word, we can hear him. We can feel that stir. Okay, and I'll tell you what, when you hear his voice, you know, your life will never be the same. Never be the same. I felt that stir and that voice and that push, and it was simply pick up the phone. Don't you give up. You call him back. So I picked up the phone, I called him, and I said, hey, John, it's me again. He says, yeah, I know, I just told you no. Now, I didn't know what I was going to say, okay? I'm literally making this up on the spot. I said, hey, I love barbecue, and I do some barbecuing in my backyard. How about if we do a fundraiser for little Megan at your church, and all the money that we raise from it will go for her? So he says, oh, okay, calls his wife, calls him back in about 10 minutes. He says, okay, we're game for that, but one condition. You know, Megan starts her next round of chemo in a week or so. The event has to be on this Saturday, 10 days from now. Hey, no problem. I'll cook all the time. I love doing this. Fantastic. Now, I had only cooked in my backyard, okay, for friends, 10 people, 20 people, places like that. And quite frankly, it didn't always come out good. I did over the years, okay? This event was 10 days later, 450 people RSVP, okay? We didn't have the equipment, we didn't have the know-how, we didn't have the storage, we had no idea how we were going to pull this off, okay? And guess what? That's when God showed up. And that's when he tends to. You know, you look at it, when there's no other reason you're going to give credit to anything else, that's when God shows up. And he showed up in such a big way. People started pouring in and equipment. I remember one day Monica called me up at work, and she said, John, you better get home. And I said, oh, okay, what's wrong? She said, oh, you'll see. Our office was up here in Lake Mary. Matter of fact, just around the corner from here. So I'm coming down I-4, come into home, I pull into my driveway, and I have to come to a screeching halt, okay? In the driveway was one of these huge smokers on a trailer, you know, as big literally as a stage, with a yellow sticky note on it. It said, hey, John, heard you might need this. Call me when you're done. Okay? And to this day, actually, I've never met the guy. I called him, he came and picked it up when I was gone, and that was just one thing. Refrigerators, people started, God showed up. And literally, those next 10 days, it was just amazing to watch God in motion, okay? And that's, I look back on it, that's the confirmation. This is what God wanted us to be doing. When you're not controlling the situation, when it's not you, you're showing up, you're believing, and you're doing your part, and you turn it over to God, and He lets go. That's when you're stepping in that right direction. And we fed all those 450 people. We raised a lot of money, and like I said on there, nobody got sick in the process of it. And I'll never forget that night. Okay, I was wiped out. I was lying on the ground, and Monica comes over and she's poking at me. She says, "You okay?" And I said, "Oh," I said, "I feel so alive." Looks so alive. I said, No, this is great. I said, "I want to do this." And she says, "Do what?" And I couldn't articulate it at the time, but you know what it was? For the first time in my life, I took the passion that God put in my heart of cooking, and I did it to help other people. I did it to do His will. And that's where happiness came from. And quite frankly, that's where success comes from. When you do what God intended you to be doing for His purpose, when you line those two up, that's when things happen in your life. And at that moment, we started our barbecue ministry. And for the next 4 years, out of our garage, literally anytime kids or schools or churches needed money, I said, "Well, I'll write you a check." I said, "How about if I bring out my smoker and I'll cook for you? You don't have to pay." We never did it commercially. You don't have to pay for anything, and we'll just donate it, and all the money you raise will go for that cause. And people would say yes. And year over year, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And Monica says, "You're just doing this so you get bigger smokers year after year after year." That last year, out of our garage, we served over 40,000 people in the ministry, okay? We never took a penny for it. It was just a love and that's the other thing. When I was going to work, I became the president of the business, okay? You know what? I was just counting days. I was counting days for that weekend so I could actually do the ministry work. And that's when I knew I was in the wrong place. When that disparity became so great between the two. Now, that ministry got so big. Did any of you guys ever go to our first little restaurant on Fairbanks? Oh, God bless you. Thank you. You parked in one of 11 parking spots. That little place wasn't supposed to be a restaurant. People told me how big of an idiot I was at building this thing. It was supposed to be a commissary that I could run the ministry out of. And matter of fact, when we built that thing, I don't know if you remember that little teeny room that we had when you came in and you had the line of food. We didn't think people were going to come in and buy our food. That was supposed to be all the leftovers from the weekend when we did the ministry work. Matter of fact, we had a little bell the first day when we opened that we put on the line, so that if people came in, we'd be in the back cooking. We wouldn't know if they actually came in. They'd ring the bell when we come out there. Little did we know what God was intended, okay? However, once you start stepping into your passion, okay, be ready. Be ready. This is when the enemy doesn't want you there. And boy, I'll tell you what, it's going to start coming at you hard. And it certainly did. This was in 2009, okay? This project was supposed to take 3.5 months to build out. It's an old Just Brakes tire facility. It was supposed to be $188,000. And I still have the quote from our architects and our builders and all this stuff. 6.5 months into it, over $500,000 of our family capital poured into this. And my builder had walked off the job. God bless him, he was in a negative cash situation. It stopped showing up. The project is at a complete standstill, okay? I have no idea how to fix it. And by the way, this was 2009, okay? All the money that we had from retirement, we had put into mutuals, invested. They were down 60%. All the other money that we had, we built this big, beautiful house. I hate debt. The moment we moved into it, we were upside down in it. Okay? To put it in complete light, for the first time in our marriage, Monica and I, we were down to 60 days of cash and no solution, no idea how to get out of this mess. And on top of that, everybody telling me why I was going to fail. He waits for you to get to that bottom point. And I tell you, I was at that bottom point. Everybody was telling me, how many restaurants closed. It was a terrible location. Granted, it was a bad location. It was on the wrong side of the road, okay? You're going to serve brisket. This is when Smoky Bones is going through all their iterations. Barbecue is regionalized, which is bunk, by the way. You can't serve brisket down here. It's all pork, and you have to be able to serve pork. You're going to make people sit at picnic tables with strangers they don't know. You're not going to give them plates. You're going to fail. You're going to fail. Constant barrage of failing. And that's when you have to listen to your heart and not your head. And listen, because once you get that close, to, if it's easy, it's not worth doing. And if you walk away, there's an old saying by Mark Twain, 20 years from now, you'll regret more the things that you did not try versus those that you did try and fail at. Regret is an awful, awful thing. At my bottom point, now he hits me with the biggest bat, his temptation. I get a phone call from the man that I love, my CEO prior to me, my mentor, my spiritual mentor, my business mentor. He knew what I was going through. He was smarter after he retired. He called me up and he says, John, we're buying 3 specialty pharmacies. We're going to combine the assets. We're going to put the company right here in Orlando. Would you like to be the CEO? Okay. This call came on a Friday, and I'll tell you, my spirits just skyrocketed. I finally had a way out. I will tell you this, though. During that low point, okay, Monica doesn't necessarily share this feeling, but I would go back because it was at that low point that my relationship was closest to God. There wasn't a single moment I wasn't praying. There wasn't a single morning I wasn't on my knees. Please, God, help me get out of this. Help me get through this. And that I so miss that closeness on a day-to-day basis. And like I said, sometimes he has to put you there to make you realize how much he loves you. He calls me, he offers me that position. My spirits soar like that. I said, let me call you back on Monday when I speak to Monica, because I had to check in my gut. Go home that weekend, and we talked about it, and we prayed about it. And thank goodness for the strength of faith of my wife, Monica. Because we stood by and she says, you know what, John? She says, if you really truly believe this is what God wants you to be doing in your life, just, I will stand by you. I will stand by you even if we lose everything. And what a relief that was off of my shoulders. And I called Steve up and I said, Steve, thank you on Monday. Thank you so much, but I'm going to pass. And he was a bit surprised. And he says, why? I said, well, I really think this is what God wants me to be doing. I don't know how I'm going to get out of it, but I believe this is what God wants me to do, and I don't want to give up on that. And second, I have 2 teenage children at the time, and I want my 2 children to see that their father has the courage to pursue his dreams and even fail at it versus not even have the faith to take that step. I'm going to tell you what happened right after that, but I'll tell you this first. 3 months later, after we opened, the deal, those 3 specialty pharmacies he was putting together, it fell through. It wasn't a blessing. It was a temptation. I hung up the phone with him. Okay, everything changed. Everything changed, I believe, for one reason. Because obedience and blessings go together. And Isaiah talks about that. When we obey God's word, we open the door for God's blessings to pour in. And they go just like that. I got 2 phone calls in the next week. Okay? First phone call came from a buddy actually up here, running a Bible study off Markham Woods Road. And one of the guys in the Bible study lives down in Maitland. He's got some fetish for a coffee place in Winter Park. Every Tuesday morning, he would go get his coffee, come up to I-4 and drive up here. When he goes to the Bible study this particular Tuesday morning, and he's just shaken up. And my buddy, Kirk, says to him, he says, you okay? He says, something happened. He says, yeah, he says, I don't understand it. He says, I was coming up Fairbanks, and I was going by this construction site, and I looked at it, and I felt like God told me I'm supposed to be involved there. And he told me that I think this guy is in trouble. And my buddy Kirk says, yeah, he's in huge trouble. He has no idea what he's doing. He needs lots of help. The gentleman's name was Brad, okay? Brad Watkins, okay, was a partner in a construction company called Friedrich Watkins. Friedrich Watkins has 2 clients in town, Disney and SeaWorld. Okay? Brad steps into my life that week, okay? Didn't know him from Adam. He gets me to CO into opening. You ready for this? 59 of the 60 days before we ran out of cash. Okay? Got us opening, never took a penny for the work that he did there. He has since his company, they built all of our facilities. Okay? And matter of fact, his office is 2 down from mine now. He left the company about 4 years ago and came and worked directly for us. Second phone call came just a few days later. Got the family, we're coming back from the beach. Okay? We spent a lot of time at the beach because it was free at the time. And we're driving down, I get back in the car, we're going down I-4 from New Smyrna, and I look down on my phone, and there's a message from a 404 phone number. And I remember saying to Monica, who in the world's calling me from Atlanta? And I'll never forget this day. I pushed the button, played the message. The kids are in the back seat. It's on Bluetooth, and everybody heard it. Mr. Rivers? He said, this is Dan Cathy. He says, I work at Chick-fil-A. I look at Mike, I said, you don't work at Chick-fil-A, you own Chick-fil-A. He said, I just had your brisket and your sausage. That's the best thing I've ever had. He says, I felt God tell me that I'm supposed to reach out to you and that you might need my help. Out of the complete blue, okay? I didn't know him. I'm a healthcare guy, all right? I'm not a restaurant guy. I guess if you're Dan Cathy, you can find out anybody's cell phone number if you really, really want to. He stepped into he gave me his home number, his cell number, his assistant's number, and you know what he gave me? The greatest thing that he did? Wasn't money. I needed it, but it wasn't money. You know what it was? It was encouragement. Okay? He built my confidence. He came alongside. It was his father that said, there's 3 things you can give people: your time, your talent, and your resources. You want to get them off your doorstep the fastest? You write them a check. You want to help them grow? You pour into their lives. That's so much more valuable, and thank goodness he was there. Every phone call, everything I had tons of questions and tons of questions. And he helped me out so much, and I'll never forget, we're going up toward the opening now, and I said to him, I feel like I got to have a pro forma. I got to have some kind of budget. I said, how much should we be doing in sales? And in restaurant business, you track average daily sales. And he says, well, John, he says, we were so small. We were 1,300 square feet. 1,300 square feet, little barbecue place. He says, what do you say? You do $1,500 a day, you'd be doing really good. He says, you do $2,000 a day, you'd be doing fantastic. So it was October 26th in 2009. There were only 12 of us. I was the carver. Monica was down on the cash register. Everybody was in the back. We were down to 1 day of cash. We didn't have money to advertise. We didn't have money to promote. We couldn't do anything whatsoever. Except we all gathered that morning and we just prayed. We just prayed that God would show up, and we unlocked the door. And that's when it happened. At first, the people who came in were our friends who knew what we were going through, knew what we were doing. And then second from there, you know what? It was a great lesson in business and in marketing. It was all the people in the community that we had supported. You depend on the community, you pour into them. You show them your love. Then after that, it was people, we didn't know who they were. They started coming in, and they came in, and they lined up, and that line went around the building. And you know what? It never subsided. It never stopped whatsoever. That first day, in that little teeny place, we did $3,500 in sales, okay? That first year, that still stands as the lowest sales day we've ever had as a company. That first year, we closed at an average of over $10,000 a day in that little teeny place. And people ask, why? How are you doing that? People, Disney would fly in and Marriott would come in and watch us, and it was just, how are you doing this? And God's blessed us with a great product. God's blessed us with a great team. But God's blessed us with his presence. And he's stayed with us. And we have kept God in the center of our business every single day. We still run this business today as a ministry, just like we did back then. Our foundation and our ministry gave out more. I know there's some investors in the room, and I appreciate you very much. But I have to say, and my CFO doesn't appreciate this, but we actually gave out more last year than we brought home. And that makes me extremely happy. Our purpose continues to guide our decisions and what we are doing. And I do believe if we continue to keep God in the center of our company, we have 15 stores now and over 1,000 employees. If we continue to keep him in the center of what we do, he's going to continue to show up. And that's my job. That's my job with the company, is to help every single employee recognize you're not just serving a brisket sandwich today. You're changing a life. You're impacting a life. And when they look at it that way, that's when they appreciate what they do. Truett Cathy also told me, gave me a great lesson. He says, you're going to grow. He says, you're going to get successful. He says, you're going to come to a crossroads and you have to make a decision. Okay? Well, what's going to define you? What's going to define the company? He says, you're going to have to choose between being success and significant. I said, what does that mean, Truett? He said, well, success is defined in many ways in our communities. Okay? It's how big the company is, how many people you have working for you, the profit that you make, the title that you have, the letters on your card. He says, all those, there's nothing wrong with those. Those are blessings from God as long as they don't define who you are and don't define your actions. Being significant. Okay? Being significant means making a difference in even one person's life, making an impact. So many times we think that our calling to make an impact is going to have to go overseas or go build an orphanage here or go to Mexico or China or so-and-so. I always challenge people. Some people are called to do that, and God bless them, but we're all called to bring God into where we are today in our workplace. And you talk about, you think it's scary going to talk to someone in China or Russia? Why don't you talk to your neighbor about God? Why don't you talk to the person in the cubicle next to you, who you're going to see every single day? That takes courage. And talking to them, making that significant impact takes so little. It doesn't take money. It doesn't take knowledge or wisdom. It just takes heart. And just looking at people in the eye, sharing your love, treating them with respect. It's amazing. You never appreciate the ramifications that one act of kindness and love can mean to that person's life and how it could impact their day. Never, ever, ever underestimate what that could do to somebody. I will leave you with this. This is my favorite saying and quote that came from Nelson Mandela in his acceptance speech. He said, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure and capable of doing all that we are called to do. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us the most. I pray each and every one of you listen to that voice from God, feel that heart, and have that courage to pursue it, and never, ever underestimate the impact of even one kind act can have on somebody else. Thank you all very much, and God bless you.
I hope you enjoyed our program today. It's always interesting to look back and wonder, why didn't I trust God? Oftentimes we're presented with circumstances and events that just don't make sense, and we want to look to ourselves to make things work out. Looking back, at least in my experiences, that never works. What works is trusting God. I remember when my husband left banking to work for a ministry, Crown Ministries, in fact, where we would have to raise our own support, and we did that for many, many years, and it all worked out. God is faithful. But there were times when it was hard. No money came in from time to time. Did we ever go hungry? Well, just look at me. I never missed a meal. We always had a roof over our heads. Our children went to great colleges, and this was all on a comparatively small salary. God is faithful to His children when we obey. Truthfully, in a lot of ways, it didn't make sense to go from a good-paying job to raising our own support. I had a brand new baby and didn't feel like I wanted to work full-time to help support us. My other daughter was a couple of years from going off to college. The expenses were real. But my husband did what he felt God was calling him to do. He went into ministry, and our lives were richer for it. What do we do? What do you do when following God's lead doesn't make sense? One word: trust. He will never forsake His children. I can say that from personal experience. It's true. Isaiah 55:8-9 say it best. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. And that, dear friends, is our note of hope for today. Thanks so much for joining us, and God bless you.
You just watched Welcome Home with Barbara Beck, a Good Life 45 original production. That makes you a part of our Hope team here on Good Life 45, where hope happens.